titles of mining claims, plumed war bonnet of merit, but I will remember where I was born. I will fall in love with a rawhide quirt from Santa Cruz. I will get me a bottle of Boston Sea and a Dixie crooner to sing me blues. I'm tired of loving a foreign muse. I've lived in this old house in Nyack for over 37 years. Charlie and I planted those trees when I was a young bride. From my garden, the Hudson River looks much the same as it did when Henry Hudson explored it, or when Washington Irving graced it with legends. I feel close to our country's past here, as well as to my own, and that's a comfortable feeling, because awareness of America was as much a part of my childhood as oatmeal for breakfast. And the American theater has shaped my whole life. Since the 20th century and I arrived together, that goes back a long way. America has changed, the American theater has changed, and heaven knows I've changed in all that time. But one thing is certain. I've been right smack in the middle of it all, both as a person and as an actress. It has been very gratifying, very, to find, after all these years, that they do appreciate all that I have tried to do for them, for their good, and for this dear country of ours. We have been so near together today, they and I. Oh, my dear people of England and Scotland and Wales and Ireland, and the dear colonies and India. Such loyalty, such devotion, it's most extraordinary, most extraordinary. Will you tell Mr. Chamberlain how very much I approve all the arrangements he has made for the proper representation of all parts of my empire in the procession? Everything was in perfect order. It was very gratifying, very gratifying. Well, I must go and rest now, or I shall not be able to take my place at dinner, and that would never do. Oh, Bertie! Bertie, oh. Yes. You were in front, and I don't think you saw this. It happened right at Hyde Park, a corner. There was a great crowd there, you know. And, of course, it never should have happened, but it didn't matter, really. A great group of very rough-looking men broke right through the lines of the police and the troops guarding the route. And I heard one of them say as they ran alongside the carriage, "Go it, old girl, you've done it well." Of course, they were very unsuitable, the words, but very gratifying. And oh, I hope it's true. I hope it's true. Hark. They are still cheering. Oh, Albert. Albert. If only you could have been here. What makes an actress? The talent you're born with, the skills you learn, the experiences that shape your understanding and your spirit. Since my early experiences were all as American as the 4th of July, it seemed ironic to me that my roles should have been so many of them queens, and that Victoria Regina in Lawrence Houseman's play should be probably my most famous role. Here I am when the spirit was new, already greedy for sight and sounds. In Washington, D.C., my hometown, the sights and sounds were red, white, and blue. From the time I was tiny, Father and I took the trolley on Sundays to the Washington Monument, where John Philip Sousa led his Marine Corps band. Sunday by Sunday, those sounds became part of my pulse beat. The big event every 4 years was the inaugural parade. My parents and some of their friends would chip in to rent a front room in one of the sleazy hotels on Pennsylvania Avenue near the Capitol, and we'd all squeeze into the window to watch Teddy or W.H. Taft or Woodrow Wilson make his progress to the White House. Joy in America, in the land itself as well as in its heritage, was a sparkling enthusiasm with us all, which I've never outgrown. If Sousa marches were my lullaby, certainly the theater was my kindergarten. Nobody ever read books much in my family, or at all in those days. They went to shows. That was boom time for the American theater, and everything that was successful on Broadway went out on the road. Sometimes 4 and 5 companies of them. And every time a good artist or a good play appeared at the National Theater in Washington, you could always find my mother or her mother, my Granny Hayes, having borrowed from the household funds. They would be standing in line there outside of the gallery entrance, waiting for the doors to open and the grand rush to the peanut gallery. Sometimes they asked me to come along, and when I look back on it, I believe it was because I was very tiny and very nimble, and I could run ahead of everybody up the 3 flights of steps and then fling myself full length across about 3 seats and save them. I didn't get behind the footlights until I was 6. Oh my, all that wasted time. A friend of my mother's, who was very stage-struck, my mother, he invited her to let me play Prince Charles in a royal family at a local stock company. Stock companies dotted the country in those days, and their actors became idols of the community, often stayed on for years. They did new plays each week, and often, well, every week, all year long. It was rather a rough schedule, but it certainly developed actors, and it developed audiences, too. There were parts for me at the Columbia Stock Company, and by that time, I was established in Miss Minnie Hawk's dancing classes. There wasn't much to show off with me. At 3, as a shamrock, I was a disaster, and I didn't fare much better as a little Dutch girl. And finally, by the time I was 6, Miss Hawks gave up and suggested that I would be better in singing or miming. And so my mother took up the suggestion and decided to have me do an imitation of Annabelle Whitford doing the Gibson Bathing Girl, which she had done in the new Ziegfeld Follies. Now, how do you account for the magic of fate? That year, the great producer and comedian Lou Fields happened to be playing in Washington at that time, and he came over to the Belasco Theater to pick up his mail. And he heard some applause and laughter coming and music coming from the theater, and he went in to see what it was all about. How do you say to a young actress who asks you how to get started in the theater? How do you tell her? Do you say, now you must be sure to be in the right place at the right time? At the very moment that I stepped out to do the Gibson Bathing Girl, Mr. Fields walked in and stood at the back of the Belasco Theater. Mr. Fields left after my little number, but not before he said to the theater manager, if that child's parents ever want to put her on the stage, send her to me. Well, it took my mother and me 2 long years to decide that I was ready for New York. And happily, when he was confronted by my little Gibson Bathing Girl picture, Mr. Fields hired me at once. Oh, I so well remember that fateful song. Why do they call me the Gibson girl, Gibson girl, Gibson girl? What is the matter with Mr. Ibsen, Mr. Ibsen? Why Dana Gibson? Wear a blank expression and a monumental curl. Walk with a bend in your back and they'll call you the Gibson girl. The child obviously had talent. It was an optimistic time to join the American theater. Oh, it was booming. There were 41 theaters in New York, legitimate theaters, and about six vaudeville theaters. The plays weren't very good. They were mediocre, either very sentimental or melodramatic, but they were great vehicles for great stars. Here I am as Little Mimi, my first part on Broadway, in Lou Field's production of Old Dutch, score by Victor Herbert. We opened in the fall of 1909 at the Herald Square Theater. Victor Herbert himself was conducting in the pit. Once again, I was Destiny's child. The 4 years spent under the watchful eyes of Mr. Fields in 4 different shows threw one into the company of the great comics of the day. They were a troubled lot, often quite tense, because comedy's a serious business, full of traps and dangers. You have to be on the alert every minute, lest the audience catch you trying to make them laugh. I had grown during those 4 years from a wee cuddly thing into what Mr. Fields described to us as the awkward age. So we parted, I broken-hearted, and I went home to D.C. feeling like a has-been at 13. But Mother's local stock company friend was there, waiting to exploit the local talent that had made good on Broadway. I played Lord Fauntleroy, Prince and the Pauper, a handful of great children's roles, and I became the Shirley Temple of Washington, D.C. And then again, fate took a hand. The ingenue of the stock company was an exquisite English actress named Jessie Glendinning, whom I was said to resemble. A year later, that chance resemblance brought me back to Broadway. A telegram ordered, "Bring Helen Hayes Brown to Charles Frohman's office in the Empire Theater for an important part in a play with John Drew." In 1914, Charles Frohman and the Empire Theater were the highest to which an actress could aspire. Frohman had the supreme stable of stars: Maud Adams, Billy Burke, William Gillette, Ethel Barrymore, her uncle John Drew. John Drew was not a great actor, but the greatest of stars. I had moved from the best of the American musical theater to the best of the dramatic stage. Opening night was the most glamorous I can remember, but unfortunately The Prodigal Husband was not a good play. And Mr. Drew closed the show in Washington to deliver me home. Now I faced the problem of looking too young for my age. The parts were scarce for a 17-year-old girl who looked 10. But fortunately, somebody brought me to the attention of George C. Tyler, who happened to be looking for a Pollyanna. Now, that was a role that spanned the ages from 10 to 17, so he put me in the Western Road Company. And after that, he took an interest in me, put me in Booth Tarkington's adaptation of his wonderful book, Penrod. Here I am as the love interest at last. And so, to dear Brutus, on loan to the Frohman Company, and a chance to play with the great William Gillette. It was as Margaret in this play that I became a permanent member of the American theater and not just a drop-in visitor. With what joy I went to the theater every night. William Gillette was an actor with great style and presence who also had subtlety and insight. His every line reading was a lesson. On the 23rd of December, 1918, the opening night of Dear Brutus at the Empire Theater, I was the great new discovery. Of course, I had discovered myself 10 years ago when I first opened with Lou Fields, but it took the critics that long to catch up with me. As I sparkled into Mr. Gillette's dressing room the second night with the evidence in my hand, he thundered at me. "Don't ever do that again. Don't ever read another review." Then he patiently explained to me. A cruel review can break your heart, A good review can hurt a performance if the critic has described its virtues in too great detail. It makes you self-conscious. And then he reassured me that if there was any constructive criticism in a review, I'd hear about it at once from the director. I believe that advice from William Gillette has had a lot to do with my endurance in the theater. Because above all, an actress has to keep her courage up. We're all victims of fears and self-doubts. We have to move cautiously through a career to protect the fragile feelings and prides that we have, so as not to shatter the wall of our sensitivity. The next season, Mr. Tyler had plans of his own for me. He had commissioned Booth Tarkington to write a new comedy, Clarence, for the young Alfred Lunt, and I was to play Cora. It was just the right diversion for a war-weary public. When it opened, that was in September of 1919, and it was acclaimed as the greatest American comedy of all time. Oddly enough, Clarence dealt with one of today's most pressing problems, how to handle your kids. Bobby Wheeler, too, upset his family by the way he dressed, and Cora was a defiant flapper daughter. Here we all are, Alfred Lunt, Helen Hayes, and Glenn Hunter. But for this perfect piece of Americana, we are going to do better than photographs. I want you to meet 3 young actors from the American theater who are going to do a short scene from Clarence for us. Now, of course, you know Orson Bean.
Hi, Helen.
He's going to play, hello, Orson. He's going to play Alfred Lunt's part, Clarence, and Oliver Conant, he's going to play Bobby, which was played by Glenn Hunter. And my darling Jennifer Harmon is going to play my part, which was Cora. So now, shall we start? Are we all ready?
The entrance?
From Cora's entrance, fine.
Oh, if 2 people ever made me tired, it's Papa and Miss Penny, Puritan.
Oh, darling, I'm going to be a pest. I have to stop you. But you see, this was 1919, and in those days, an ingenue never walked. This would do all right for today. What you're doing is perfect. But she didn't walk. She flitted. Honestly, I used to get home sometimes from the dress rehearsals, and I would be black and blue from flitting on on the stage, unfamiliar with the set.
Pieces of furniture.
I would fall on my face a lot. But anyway, you have to flit, and then they never sat; they perched. Wait a minute, it's quicker if it's...
Yeah, you show me.
Let me just do it. Oh, heaven help me, I hope I can. You see. And then when you want to move, oops. When you want to like this, you see. Oh, don't be afraid you'll overdo, because what you think is overdoing, that's just where we began.
Oh, all right.
Clarence had liver trouble. There's a line in the script. Now, did he sit a certain way because of the liver trouble?
Well, I wouldn't know whether it was liver trouble. I just know that he was nervous because he was going to be interviewed for a job.
Right.
And by Cora's father. And he just sat with his, sort of...
And he was a soldier.
Out of nervousness, yes.
I'll play it like Alfred Lunt.
Start again? Oh, if 2 people ever made me tired, it's Papa and Miss Penny, Puritan.
I can't have been keeping you too long. I've been up to what you've been up to.
They're not through with me. They're consulting, inventing the discipline they'll have to put me through. Narrow-minded.
You've been after that old grass wizard.
He's not old.
That's it. It's the old
Wait a
grass
minute,
wizard.
excuse me. I'm concentrating on you because I remember me so well.
No, please.
You have to be higher and more shrill, because they didn't speak in that day. They squeaked, they chirped. Isn't it awful? It's true that we had conventions like the French ingenue was very piquant and very sophisticated, and the British ingenue, she was very horsey, about a Tweedy, tennis anyone type, and they strode on the stage, and then we flitted, and we perched, and we chirped.
The American ingenue chirp.
Oh, yes. The purr didn't come in until about the 1930s with Margaret Sullivan.
Yeah.
That began the purr. What?
Very hot.
Yes.
Oh, all right. Let's see. He's not old.
Oh,
He's one of the most perfect characters that ever came into my life.
Good.
What I want to know, is there any harm in that? Oh, no. Well, I leave it to you. Is there any... I leave it to you if grass widowers aren't just as perfect as the other kind of widowers.
Yeah, I guess they are just about as perfect.
Of course, I did go out motoring with him, and I did dine at his country club with him and danced until 12 o'clock. And then Miss Penny came and got us. But what I want to know, is there any harm in that?
What a vile confession.
You hush up! Of course, I did say I was going to spend the evening with a girlfriend, and then Miss Penny found out. But what I want to know, if you were my father, would you go into 35 cents over a thing like that?
Well, I don't think quite that many, no.
You just ought to see them in there. They act like judges of the Extreme Court of the United States in Washington. And what I'm afraid of is they'll never let me see him again.
Oh, you ought to be drowned. I ain't never heard so disgusting.
Oh, hush up! Oh, hush up! Oh, hush up! She deliberately comes to Papa with this because she knows that Mama's only our stepmother and hasn't any idea of discipline. And the way she goes on in there, you ought to just hear her about being responsible for the shaping of my character because she's my governess. She'll get Papa so prejudiced against me.
She hasn't told half about her. But doesn't that make you want to hate women sometimes?
Oh, I don't know. I think she's very attractive. Of course, she's not my sister.
Listen, you were in the army and all of that. What would you do if you were a girl in a fix like that?
Well, I don't know what I'd do if I were a girl in a fix like that. I don't even know what I'd do if I were a girl.
Well, anyway, I think you're awfully nice and sympathetic.
That's pretty racy stuff in those days, wasn't it? You were just adorable, thank you.
Dear.
You made me remember Alfred.
Oh, that's nice.
It was charming.
Thank heaven that acting style's behind us.
Yes, I know. I hated it even then, but I was stuck with it for many a part. Yes, I moved without losing a smidgen of my cuteness from Flapper to Sub-Deb. That was in a play made from the stories, the Babs stories of Mary Roberts Reinhardt. Yes, I remember that was when George C. Tyler, the star maker, decided over my mother's protest and my terror that it was time for my name to be put up in lights. 3 feet high, 20 years old, and there I was, a star. A squeaky star. Yes, I wasn't ready for it. I had a kind of natural, youthful ebullience, and I had a gift for knowing how things should be by instinct. And I'd hit the right approach once in a while, or most of the time, but then I didn't know how to hold on to it. And, oh dear, people began to worry about me. Even the discoverers were afraid they'd picked a lemon. But then one day, Ina Clare and Ruth Chatterton took counsel, and they straightened me out. They told me that I had a great natural gift, but that I didn't know anything about acting technique.
Oh, technique. Let me say that's such a confusing word to most actors. What does it mean to you?
I know it frightens people, Will. I like best Lynn Fontaine's definition of it. When asked that question, she said, you speak clearly and a little louder than usual, and don't bump into anybody.
So in other words, what you're saying then, in a way, is that acting is technique coupled with that extra special something.
An actress must learn to communicate through her voice, her face, her body, everything that makes up her instrument, which is her being. Also, she has to learn courage. I harp on that a lot because it takes a great deal of courage. It takes audacity to go out on a stage and give a performance. Really?
Yes.
You see, the very spotlight that we perhaps we dream about or crave, that makes us pay in turn, because every flaw, every mistake, every mishap is picked up by those bright lights and shown forth to the audience. And we have to learn how to feel that great confidence in ourselves. You know, that's really what star quality is, I believe. It's that conviction within yourself and within the audience, too, when you walk on the stage, that you are master of the situation. And that's technique. It takes technique to do that.
So what did you have to do? Obviously, you had to train for a long time.
Oh, well, of course, I took dancing and mime, voice, fencing. I took boxing.
Boxing?
Well, that was for footwork. As a new star, I set about learning the business of acting. The theater was coming of age in the 20s, and so was I. Today, I have two good friends with me here who were vitally involved in the excitement that transformed the theater of those days. Armina Marshall, wife of the founder of the Theater Guild, and Mark Conley, author of Beggar on Horseback and the great Green Pastures, the Pulitzer Prize play. Well, it was a wonderful period. Way back in 2021, my mother and I lived in Greenwich Village, and when we went to see Washington Square plays, our more regular theater going was when we had season seats for the Provincetown Playhouse, for their Sunday night dress rehearsal before the formal opening on McDougal Street. And we went to see S.S. Glencairn plays, and we went to see The Hairy Ape, and the great, Emperor Jones. Oh, such excitement. And here was something so overwhelming was being born into the American theater. We were getting a literature.
The Theater Guild started in 1920.
Yes. I remember I used to go to see the original, the parent of the Theater Guild, which was the Washington Square Theater.
Yes. That's right. And then we were at that time off-Broadway at the Garrick Theater, do you remember, on 35th Street. And it was then, after that we moved uptown. And you opened the Theater Guild. Theater. Yes, it was the spring of 25.
Season Cleopatra, yes.
And it was a very auspicious opening, let us say. And you were chosen to be the star of Caesar and Cleopatra. And you
don't forget to tell how I got chosen. I wanted to play that role so badly. I loved it, and I cherished it close to my heart. And it was my one and only sincere ambition that I ever had in the theater. Was the one role I really wanted to play very much. And when I heard that you were going to do it at the Theater Guild, I joined the parade of young actresses. I was a star then. My name was in lights, and yet I joined the parade who went down to audition. That was the first of my queens. But I knew, even as I was struggling with that role, that perhaps because I wanted it too much, I just never realized the full depth of that part. I looked upon it as just a cute flapper, which it was actually. Shaw had written it that way, but he left it to the actress to supply something that was deeper and more interesting. And I didn't know enough to supply that then, but you know, I felt a failure in it, and I couldn't live with myself until 10 years later. I went over across this county to Suffern, and I played that part in a barn, a summer theater barn, and I was good. In the 20s and 1921, oh, Mark, that's where you and George Kaufman burst upon the scene. That was your first play together, wasn't it? With Dulcie? Oh, I remember so well.
For a little girl who'd been playing ingenues with Lorette Taylor. That was a little girl named Lynn Fontanne.
Oh,
and
never tell us. I was so mystified.
And she was right good. And then George Kaufman and I began to write a lot of plays together, including one for another young actress who was already a star. It was Miss Hayes.
Do you ever know why Mr. Tyler asked you to write to the ladies for me? I think you should know after all these years, dear, That's almost a good 50. But I went into such a sulk and such a mope because Lynn Fontaine got Dulcie written for her, and I was playing the most horrible plays. Oh, but Mark, what you did in my life, I'll never get over. You changed my life.
Oh, by letting you meet people?
That's right.
That's right.
Well, now, he made it possible for me to meet one Charles MacArthur. I was walking up Fifth Avenue one day and bumped into him, and he scooped me up, took me along with him to Nisa McMean's. You know, Nisa had a
Coming out of Saks.
That's right. And Nisa had a salon, and every afternoon you could find the great wits of New York and all the highly creative people. And off in a corner I sat, not knowing how in the world to talk to all these awesome people. And this beautiful young man came over, and he was eating out of a little peanut, one of those little paper peanut, salted peanut bag. And he looked down at me, and I couldn't even smile. I could just stare and wish, all I wanted was a way to get out of there. And he finally said, "Would you like a peanut?" And I said, "Thank you." And he poured a few in my hand and looked at them and said, "I wish they were emerald." And I was in love at that moment because I'd never had a pretty speech made to me before that I remember. And from that moment on, he was stage center in my life. After I had realized that ambition and had played Cleopatra, I had a long, lean year. I didn't get another engagement the whole next year. I think I lost a little prestige with that performance. People asked me if I ever had a struggle in the theater. I believe it was all concentrated in that one year. And one day, William A. Brady called me and asked me if I would be in a revival of What Every Woman Knows. After all those cute flappers, that turned out to be the one. It didn't run 4 weeks. It ran 46 at the Bijou. And then quite a while on the road. And that was the way people began to think of me seriously. It's funny, the mystery of destiny.
That part was the beginning of getting really wonderful parts offered to you, wasn't it, Helen?
Yes. What Every Woman Knows, I think, earned me the role of Miss Norma in Coquette. I think that was when George Abbott got confidence in me. And here is George Abbott, who was the director and co-author of Coquette. Oh, my goodness. I'm going to just try to see if I can mention a few. Now, let's see. Boys from Syracuse, Three Men on a Horse, Pal Joey, Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, Call Me Madam.
How about some acting credits? I've been a leading man to both you girls.
I remember you in Xander the Great with Alice Brady. He was so romantic.
Women were swooning over him.
Yeah.
And they have been ever since. As a matter of fact, George, you know.
True. Yes.
Well, Coquette was one of the best. Coquette was the one very serious play I did. And so when people tell me, "Oh, you only do farces, don't you?" You see, I wish they could be there to see the weeping women come out of that theater.
Yes.
Remember how they cried?
Oh, my, yes. I had a peephole to watch them. Isn't it terrible? After I'd gone off to commit suicide, I used to run around and watch them. Oh, I'm ashamed to say it. But I wasn't really involved deeply within myself in Coquette because I have a terrible secret. I never liked Miss Norma Besant very much, and it haunted me again later through The Glass Menagerie, because I always used to say that Amanda in The Glass Menagerie was Miss Norma
Growing up.
25 years later. They seemed about the same kind of unrealistic, silly women living in fantasy.
Did you ever see her play The Glass Menagerie?
No.
Well,
I saw her play Coquette.
yes.
He made me play Coquette.
I saw it when I was
He created
young.
that performance, bless his heart. He was such a good director.
Helen, that was kind of a daring play in its time. I think how tepid it would be now. But I know the audience almost gasped when you said to your friend, you said, "I'm going to have a baby."
Oh, wasn't it terrible?
If they had awards in those days, you and I would have each had one.
Thank you, sir. I consider that a real award. But of course, all that success that was going on then, it had its drawbacks. You know, I wanted so much to get married to Charlie, and he needed a new success. He'd only had one before, 4 or 5 years before that, and he needed another hit before he'd get hitched to the star, and so it was kind of hard. I was desperately unhappy waiting for him to get a hit too, and then of course it came along in the front page.
Oh, the front page was the biggest hit of the next season of 1928.
That's right, and we were still playing Coquette in New York, and do you remember that you and Jed Harris allowed me to take that night off? You closed Coquette for one night. Weren't we all sentimental in those days? So that I could go to see Charlie's play open, and I sat up in the balcony, and Charlie and Ben Hecht they just didn't have the nerve to come inside the theater. They were sitting out on a fire escape outside, and after each scene, I was to come out and tell them how things were going. And the first act went along well, and the response was good, but then something like lightning came barreling on the stage, and it was Dorothy Stickney as Molly Malloy. And she played that scene with such electricity, such magic, that when she finally went off, they wouldn't stop applauding. I thought that she'd, you know, that old saying, she'd stop the shows. They wouldn't let the play go on. But there was no question after that that the front page was a big hit, and that I was going to get my man. He would marry me then. We were married on August 17th, 1928. And in July 1929, I ended the tour of Coquette because our daughter Mary was on the way. Charlie brought me to Nyack. He had grown up here, the son of a minister at the old missionary college. We put down roots in this house that Charlie dubbed Pretty Penny. Charlie MacArthur met a shy, overprotected girl who had already lingered too long in childhood. He released me from my cocoon and sent me flying out into life. I've always been grateful to many people for developing me as an actress. My mother, lots of directors and producers and other actors. But it was Charlie that helped me make the big step. Training can teach you technique, but it takes living to give you a wider scope. I once heard a person described